welcome. Now, today joining us we have Taieri MP Ingrid Leary. Hello, how are you?
Good, thank you. Kia ora.
Kia ora. Now, Ingrid, tell us some more about yourself. Who are you?
I am a 54-year-old mother of 3 Pacifica children. I'm of Dutch heritage. I've lived and worked in quite a few countries. So I've lived in Fiji and Australia and Tonga, and I've worked all around the world in different roles. And I'm currently living in South Dunedin, which I absolutely love, and serving there as the MP for Taieri.
Thank you very much. Now, obviously, you are the MP for Taieri. It's been almost 100 years since the last MP, and you are the first female MP. So tell
You've done
me
your
a bit more.
homework, because lots of people don't know that. So well done.
Thank you very much. So, yes, tell me more about Taieri, because it's an interesting little place, isn't it?
Yeah, so South Dunedin, or Dunedin South as the seat was called, is one of the iconic Labor seats. It's pretty much always been Labor. It's been the home to some really incredible politicians such as Grant Robertson, Claire Curran, some Michael Cullen, and it's a very Labor, safe Labor seat. Many years ago, in the 1870s, as you mentioned, there was a seat called the Taieri seat, and it was more located around Mosgiel. What's happened is Dunedin South no longer exists as a seat, and the Taieri seat has been reconfigured. So it includes South Dunedin, but not the Otago Peninsula. It includes Mosgiel, where I've just opened a second office, and it goes down through Milton, Kaitangata, Henley, all the way down past Balclutha to Kaka Point and across to Middlemarch. And so it's kind of a long, skinny electorate. It's much more driving distance, and it combines these very different communities, which are the urban centre of South Dunedin, which is very densely populated and has quite high deprivation levels, with some of the more affluent rural areas and farmland, such as Kaka Point and Middlemarch, and then also some townships with really interesting history, such as Kaitangata, which used to be a coal mining town, and Milton has got a correctional facility or a prison. So it's a very diverse electorate, and it means lots of travel and lots of different communities of interest. And I love diversity, so it suits me.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with you. Yeah, it's a interesting little town, with lots of heritage and history behind it. So how did you enter politics? What was some big challenges for you there?
Sure. Being a politician had always been in the back of my mind. So when I was about 7, all I wanted to do was be a journalist, and I was dead set on that. And I did become a journalist, and I've been a broadcaster for years. And for me, that's around this interest in being able to get voices at the table to tell their stories or to have a voice that are not normally heard. I see the other subsequent work that I've done as a continuation of that, because I was a lawyer for a while, and I set up the pro bono section of Russell McVeigh in Wellington when I was there briefly. I've done lots of documentaries, mainly in the first person voice, and usually from quite marginalised communities. So as well as working on some mainstream kind of shows like I Am Innocent, which is around, innocent people who've been wrongfully incarcerated. Beyond the Darklands with Nigel Latter, I directed quite a few episodes of that. But I also did stories about, like a series of stories about HIV positive women living in the Pacific. And I did quite a few stories and shows actually for Māori television when it first came out. And then I became the director of the British Council after a stint as journalism lecturer, and that was really it's working for the UK, trying to create friendly knowledge and understanding. But a lot of the work that we did was around development of sort of looking at development and getting local voices to be able to get tino rangatiratanga in terms of their access to development funds. So for me, politics is just a natural progression of that, which is around trying to be a bridge for getting other voices to the table. And, to do that, you have to be a team player. And also, I just love difference and diversity. So I walk amongst many different communities, including my children's Pacifica communities, international communities, rich people, poor people. I just love people from all diverse and different gender identities as well. So that's kind of how I got into it. The good thing is that I'm a bit older, so that's helpful in politics. I think it gives you a bit of wisdom. The challenge was that I had tended to not be heavily involved in the party until quite close to my selection, and that was because being a journalist, one needs to be seen as independent. So I kept my political allegiances fairly close to my chest, although anyone following my journalism would have understood where my political leanings were.
Yeah, I guess there is an aspect of that you need to be a people's person to be a politician, isn't there?
Absolutely. I also moved quite recently to Dunedin, quite close to the election, about a year out. So, you know, that was a challenge, but Dunedin people, and I knew this because my father's family had come from Arrowtown, moved over to Dunedin, and then ultimately went to Wellington. But when I arrived in Dunedin, I felt like I was around my aunties and uncles. There's a lot of senior people, so I'm relatively young in the electorate, even at the ripe old age of 54. But there's a real egalitarian sense. There's a real openness, but egalitarianism. Everybody, you know, they call a spade a spade. They want you to give them time for conversations, find out how you tick. And if they like you and you've got their trust, then that's something that will be with them for a long time. So I feel very at home in that kind of environment. It's quite direct, and I'm quite a direct person. And I was really lucky to gain their trust quite quickly. And I've worked really hard over the last year to show that they have got a good MP.
Absolutely. So since you've become an MP in 2020, I mean, that's a year ago almost. That's been quite far. What has been your most memorable thing so far?
Gosh, it's been a massive learning curve. And there's a lot to juggle, both in terms of being out and about in the electorate, helping constituents with cases, and then also getting to grips with all the process and the dynamics at Parliament. I think the really memorable moments for me have been when legislation's been going through the House, and it's been stuff that's close to my heart. So two of those things for me, there's about three of them actually. One is the BD MRR legislation, which is around trans and intersex people being able to choose their own identity without having to go through a big drama with medical certificates and so on. My office actually got graffitied because I've been a supporter of that kaupapa. I'm not particularly vocal about it, but for some reason I was targeted. And I'm very aware through the conversations I've had with those communities that how painful some of the stigma and discrimination is, and some of these processes that add more layers of stigma and discrimination. So that was a really good moment when that went through just last week. The 3 strikes law is very close to my heart. I find it abhorrent that we can look at usurping the role of judges who should be doing the sentencing. And judges have got many tools available when they sentence people to be able to apply long sentences where they require them. But what that 3 strikes law did was it was grossly unfair to some people. And we saw a remarkable case of somebody who was going to spend many years in prison for a 3rd offence where he had tried to kiss somebody on the street. It was not proportionate. He had, particular characteristics, which meant that he was vulnerable as well. And ultimately, the Court of Appeal got involved in that. So that was just an example of how unfair that was. Another key thing that was really a defining moment for me was when we got the Māori wards legislation through. And this was looking at some of the, institutional and racial bias that exists in our systems. And I was only one of 65 votes, and I hadn't worked on that particular issue. But when that got through, it made me realise that without all of those votes, we wouldn't have got it over. So even being one of 65 on an issue that you're not necessarily fully engaged on but supportive of, you're still part of that team that got that through. And so I'm really grateful to the ministers and to our party and to all our supporters for being able to get those 3 really important things over the line.
Yeah, look, I did see that photo on Facebook of your office getting vandalized. I was quite upset because, you're obviously doing what's best for your electorate and, the wider community. Um, yeah, so if you weren't a politician, what would you be doing? I know you did say that you were in journalism and the British Council, but other than that, would there be something that you'd be doing?
That's a really interesting question, because when I was looking to leave the British Council, I'd been there for 12 years. And my
Hmm.
question to myself was whether to try and work at a very senior role in the public sector or whether to get into politics. And I feel that I'm a better advocate than I am a manager, although there is lots of overlap. So perhaps that might have been one path I would have gone down. However, I'm pretty sure I would have always found my way into politics. I'm very interested in justice, particularly what I would call, some people say social justice, but I actually feel it's economic justice. So how can we rethink capitalism and rethink the way that we provide government services as well, and public services, in a way that really looks at community solutions and empowers communities to be in charge of their own destinies. At the moment, I still feel everything is far too top-down and too hierarchical. And I'm really lucky I sit on the Finance and Expenditure Select Committee. So that is one vehicle where I can see some capacity for being able to advocate for change.
Absolutely. So, as in your opinion, as a politician, what are some issues that New Zealand is facing at the moment?
The biggest issue that, we've got some very big ones, and there's the immediacy of COVID. There's the very urgent and long-term and existential issue of climate change. And then wrapped up in all of that, the one that I care so passionately about is inequality. And all of them are to do with inequality. I mean, COVID has highlighted inequality, but it's also exacerbated it. And I've just seen, for example, an article in the paper today that says that the Billionaires Club, which used to own 2% of the world's wealth, now owns 3.5% of the world's wealth. And that has come out of COVID. So we're seeing the effect that COVID is having on increasing inequality. And of course, climate impacts differently on different communities, and particularly on Indigenous communities all around the world. So what I'm always looking for is where can I add value in the advocacy or conversation around reducing inequality. And some of it will be around how we look at our environment, but some of it is also how we look at capitalism and what we can do rather than redistributing wealth. How can we make wealth fairer in the first place? And I'm a massive fan of social enterprise and social impact investing. And those are tools that I'd like us to see us harness much more in our society.
Yeah, that's entirely true. How can someone enter politics or, get involved with, some of the wonderful causes that many politicians are doing?
If people have got political aspirations, and whether it's to become an MP or to be in the engine room or to be a volunteer, politics has room for everybody. And it's fantastic to see particularly young people wanting to be politically engaged, because we do shape the future. Humankind shapes its own future, and the world may seem fixed, but actually everybody has a lot more influence in how the future looks for themselves and for everybody else the more they get involved. So I've often spoken, or a couple of times, at university courses where they're teaching politics, and my number one advice is to check out some political parties and see where your values align, and then get involved. Just start volunteering, start delivering leaflets, get on a committee, start thinking about policy. And that is a really good way of working your way into the political system. And you learn very quickly where your strengths are and where you can add the most value. And I think it's really important because everybody can add value to democracy.
Absolutely. It's people power, yeah. So what is your message for younger New Zealanders who see you and want to, aspire to be like you, to make change?
I think I'm a very purpose-driven person, and I wouldn't be happy if I wasn't working on my purpose. And I'm pretty sure there's kind of this ratio of pleasure and purpose, and we all tick differently. However, I believe true happiness comes from finding purpose, and not everybody is political. Some people, their purpose might be to, make people happy through entertaining them through music or performance. There are so many ways that we can contribute to the world, but I truly believe that real happiness and peace of mind is based on how much we can connect with other human beings, and we do that through contributing. So finding the thing that lights you up, that makes you feel connected to other people, and that shows your contribution to the world, I think is the best way to find happiness, and that may or may not be through politics.
Yeah, I mean, that's more of the existentialism sort of end, which I completely agree with. I mean, you need to find your own purpose, So obviously 2021 and 2022 have been, 2020, sorry, have been some of the hardest years for a lot of people in New Zealand. What are some things you are looking forward to next year?
Well, I'm really looking forward to spending Christmas and New Year with my elderly parents who live in the North Island in Taupo. I haven't seen them for many months because of the COVID restrictions, and they're in their 80s and they're quite naturally nervous about being around too many people. So I'm looking forward to seeing them. I'm looking forward to seeing my teenagers, my 20-year-old and my 18-year-old, who I haven't seen for some months because they've been in Auckland. And I haven't been able to see them. So I'm really looking forward to spending time with my family. I have my 8-year-old son with me in Dunedin, and being together as a family is something that I know many people will be looking forward to over the coming months. And some of the stories are really heartbreaking in terms of families that have been separated by borders, not just the Auckland border, but international borders. And my heart really goes out to them. So I think for 2022, keeping it simple and just enjoying those small pleasures that we all got back in touch with during lockdowns is going to be top of mind for me, just keeping life simple.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Now, I do believe that wraps up this interview. Thank you very much, Ingrid, for joining us today.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure, and all the best to everybody out there. Go find your passion and engage politically. Thank you.
Absolutely.